Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and in today's video I wanted to go into detail about the most well-rounded build I've had the pleasure to play in PoE so far. So yep, that's right, it's more well-rounded than the cold BV I played in Ritual, and it's certainly better than some other builds that I've played, like, you know, max deck stacking TS in Harvest and stuff like that. So I consider it better than all of those, and that's primarily because it is quite defensive, and it can become even more defensive as long as you gear the character right. But we'll be talking about that a little bit later. So what is the build? It is a Corrupting Fever Tornado Shot build. And I'll go through all of these things in game with you, but a lot of people requested that I show some bossing and single target kind of footage here, and that's going to be in the background here for you guys to enjoy. So let's get into it. So what is Corrupting Fever? Corrupting Fever is a buff that you can apply to yourself by sacrificing a portion of your life. This buff will then persist on you for about 10 seconds, and it's going to grant all of your attacks, or basically all of your hits, a 100% chance to apply a Corrupting Fever stack to an enemy. And this is essentially like a Corrupted Blood charge that gets applied to you in the game. It does damage incredibly quickly, over generally about 1 second, and the damage is reasonably high. These can stack up to 10 times. Now what's interesting about Corrupting Fever is that it's a buff which can be supported by support gems. So, you know, let's say that a Corrupting Fever does like 100 base damage over 1 second. Well, you can indeed support that with support gems. So you can put all of the normal ones on there, like, you know, like damage over time supports and all sorts of stuff like that, and juice it up. And the trick to this is that doesn't actually require you to put any links at all on your primary gem. And in fact, you won't get any additional damage for putting any links on your primary gem. So for example, I can 6-link my Corrupting Fever and still have my 6-link Tornado Shot, which doesn't need any damage support. So I can put stuff like Chain, Awaken GMP, you know, like faster projectiles, life gain on hit, pretty much anything you want. So essentially, you get pretty much like an 11 link. It's like actually incredibly powerful, and that's really what it is in essence. You get all of the damage benefits of going like massive single target, massive clear, and all sorts of stuff like that. But then you also get all of the quality of life of having a clear skill, all baked into one ability. It's completely ridiculous, and it gives you one of the most well-rounded characters in terms of utility and damage for that in specific profile. So it's completely absurd with how that works. The fact that you link it by itself is crazy. Now, of course, you can get the damage to very, very high amounts. So about, if you really hyper-focused on damage, I'd say you could get about 15 to 16 million with the new jewel mods, which we'll talk about in a second here. And if you wanted to go super duper tanky, you probably want to go for like 4 mil, but you can get like 10,000 life. So there's definitely quite a bit of stuff that you can do here, but let's get into more detail. So right now in the background here, you're seeing a lower damage variant of this character. It's not using all the tools that you can kind of use to really juice up the damage of Corrupting Fever. I'll go through those in a second. Apologies for that, I don't know what that bug is. But let's talk a little bit about what's happening in 3.16. So in 3.16, they're adding new modifiers to jewels, weapons, amulets, and rings, which allow dots to do a ton more damage. So Corrupting Fever is a physical damage over time dot. There's not really too many things in the game that scales that. It's basically generic physical damage, global damage over time, and global damage over time multiplier, and then basically physical damage over time multiplier. That's pretty much it. And that's what's really, really hindered this build from really going insane, having access to more damage scaling. But GGG is adding an absolutely massive amount of damage to normal jewels. They're taking it from 4% damage over time multiplier on normal jewels that you can roll, all the way up to 8 plus an additional roll of 6, which is completely insane. They're juicing the absolute living daylights out of the potential of damage of this build in the next patch. And in addition to that, they're also adding damage over time multiplier to rings, making it more easy to access on weapons, and also adding it to stuff like amulets and all sorts of stuff like that. So basically, the TLDR is that they're basically massively buffing this build in 3.16. So it's already a massively good build, and now they're buffing the damage of it, which is completely crazy, which is going to make it so that you can either like get even more damage, or you can take some of that damage off the tree and then go straight into defense, which is going to make you even tankier, which is super duper awesome. So yeah, very, very strong there. So overall, Corrupting Fever is an incredibly powerful choice. You have an 11 link, you have really good quality of life, and it's pretty sweet. So let's talk a little bit about the Ascendancy, because I did make a video on that yesterday. So Gladiator is your pick of Ascendancy, and this is a massive advantage over previous bow builds and all sorts of other builds, because Gladiator is a duelist, and duelist has access to stuff like block, and it also has access to armor as well as evasion, which is going to be probably one of the more powerful combos with the defense rework coming up. So dodge was one of the main ways that you'd play bow characters and kind of clear speed characters. That is gone completely, and a lot of people are concerned about evasion and all sorts of stuff like that. But this character has the flexibility to actually just go for a massive life pool, get max resistances, and also go for a bit of armor using stuff like an astral plate and stuff like that with no penalty. So you can get very, very tanky, and it's really, really beneficial to your character. In addition to that, it doesn't die to the usual things that you'd be used to on a bow character. So the final build, has, anywhere between, like 6.5 to 7,000 to 10,000 if you really wanted life. And I'll show you a PoB after this if you want. But overall, the big downside of dodge and evasion characters on bow builds was that you'd get one shot by stuff which you either can't avoid or which would end up hitting you. That's not the case when you have a massive maximum hit pool. And maximum hit is essentially the biggest hit that you can take. So you're not dodging as many hits on this character, but you're able to soak them. So when you do get hit, when you're not one-shotting everything, or when you get hit by like a volatile or like a box, ice nova and stuff like that, you actually survive, which is a massive quality of life boost, and pretty much this is going to be a very easy character to get level 100 on, and it's super duper awesome. So very, very nice quality of life. You can build very, very defensively. And in addition to that, you also get the perks of going potentially block if you wanted to, with like something like a rear guard if you wanted to go down that route. So super duper awesome. Now, I covered in my previous video, but you also do get bleed explosions, which makes this character one of the best at doing blights, as well as doing delirium. And the reason for that is explosions scale off of the monster's life, and that is a massive deal when you scale up the difficulty. So in 100% delirium, explosions are king and are going to basically be the reason that you clear that. And this character is actually very good at 100% delirium and delirium in general, and it can do it fairly easily with good gear. Now with Blight, especially the new Uber Blights that are coming out, that is going to be a massive deal because the life is increased by a massive portion. And smashing the monsters with explosions, which get scaled by all of your physical damage, is going to be a very good strategy. And overall, this character is going to excel at that. So basically what I'm giving you guys here is a massive ultimate package here of Gladiator goodness, which is basically tornado shot, clear levels with insane quality of life and defense, as well as also leveraging all of the bossing potentials of dot build. So it's a massive, massive, awesome deal here. As you can see, we're going to be taking down the formed here to kind of show it off here, and then we're going to dive in game and I'm going to take you through all of the pieces, and then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how this character is going to come to be. One thing that I do want to say here is I'm not trying to sell anyone on the build. I'm just sharing this kind of discovery with you guys because I was unaware of this build before. But let's dive in game here and I'll take you guys through it. Okay, so it's fair to say that this character does have pretty endgame gear, but in the next patch, I'm going to be sharing PoBs which are super duper attainable and actually are better than this character overall. This character doesn't have as much min-maxing as you'd want, and the stats aren't in the right places to make it really, really effective. A good example of this is this character is only using one curse, and one curse is basically like 20% less damage. Because if you use Poacher's Mark, it actually juices up your damage significantly. So that allows you to like not have to have like massively crazy bow and all sorts of stuff like that. But it's fair to say I'm going to be releasing a more budget-friendly and more powerful version of this in a future video. So let's get into it. So the bow is where you house your Corrupting Fever here. You can see that you have it all in here, all of your stuff. This is essentially your 6 link, your damage link, and you can basically just juice it up with all of the plus gem levels and all sorts of stuff like that you want here. And that is going to basically really push it over the edge and take it up to the next level. So you can see here it's a level 33 Corrupting Fever, which is obviously insane. Without the synth mod, you would basically have a level 32. But ideally, what you're actually going to be using is a bow that looks a little bit... I don't actually have PoB up. I had to close it to get my frames up. But it's basically going to be an incredibly easy and deterministic bow to craft. You craft it just simply by alteration, spamming physical dot multiplier, and then using an exalted, a Warlord's Exalted Orb, as well as a normally exalted orb, and then multi-modding. That's basically it, and you can get a close to best in slot bow, which is nothing like this. You don't need a synth base or anything like that. So yeah, the bow is not going to be too hard to craft, and basically you get a 6 link of damage here without even using your gem, which is crazy. It's really, really awesome. So the next thing we want to talk about here is Tornado Shot. So Tornado Shot is your delivery method. You can basically use any skill you want. You can use brands, you could use split arrow, you can do it as melee, you can do it basically as anything you want. But I like Tornado Shot, and I think it's one of the best delivery methods as well. And it's going to be a super duper awesome pick here. So we're using Tornado Shot, link to GMP, Life Tap, we'll go over that in a second here, Maim, Awaken Chain, and Faster Projectiles. Now, let's talk a little bit about life tap. So as you see with Corrupting Fever here, it has a massive life cost. Well, not right now. Now it has a massive life cost. 12,000 life. So how do you cast this thing? How do you get it out there? Well, if you take a look at the amulet here, it has a craft on it saying skills cost no mana or life while focused. So you just put your focus on your left click here, and when you're running around, it becomes free, and you chuck it on. So now you've got Corrupting Fever on you. Well, okay, it lasts for 10 seconds, and your focus has a big long cooldown. So how do you sustain it? Well, while you're using your abilities, you're going to gain basically life tap, but the main thing here is that Corrupting Fever has an additional line on it. Basically, as you spend life, it actually becomes refreshed. So every 368 life you spend, that is basically going to be a refresh on the Corrupting Fever stack here. And you can see here that you can basically keep it up infinitely as long as you're doing a map as you would expect, which is super duper awesome, obviously. And the way you achieve this is by putting Life Tap on your Tornado Shot, which is going to basically allow you to spend life instead of mana, which means you can fully reserve your mana as well, but we're getting into that in a second here. But it's very, very powerful, and you can basically keep this buff rolling the entire map with no problems. I was a little bit hesitant at first, but it actually is super duper easy to keep it rolling, and once you get used to it, it's really, really fine, and it's definitely worth the cost. So that's going to be how that works and how you get the actual Corrupting Fever working. But yeah, as I mentioned, you can go full quality of life, and there's super duper levels of customization. If you wanted to get even more defensive, you could put life gain on hit here instead of maim, lose a bit of damage. We're using faster projectiles, which is super incredible quality of life. Basically means your Tornado Shot is going to off screen, which is incredible, and it's going to be really, really juicy here. Okay, so you did see me here in the video footage earlier take off the Headhunter, and that's because this build doesn't need a Headhunter. If you wanted to get more defensive, or you wanted to roll with more damage, you can use a Stygian Vice, or you can use a Darkness Enthroned, and that's going to actually be more damage and survivability, and pretty much you could see the clear doesn't really suffer at all. You're going to lose a little bit of projectile speed, a little bit of movement speed, but that's all Headhunter really gives you. So for the most part, you don't need a Headhunter. This build is ultimate awesome without a Headhunter. There's no issues with it at all. So you don't need this belt, but I just have it because, it's fun. It makes you clear a little bit faster, and you get a lot of movement speed. But ideally, you'd probably be using a Stygian Vice. It would make your bossing better, and it would make pretty much everything a little bit more smooth, and you'd probably be able to get to level 100 easier as well, because you won't be dying as much. So yeah, very, very good there. You don't need the belt, which is super awesome. So let's talk a little bit about minion damage here. So one of the things that you take here is Spiritual Aid. So I talked about earlier that it's pretty hard to scale Corrupting Fever and get damage for it. So Spiritual Aid is one of the ways that you do that. And that allows you to roll an additional affix on all of your gear and on the passive tree, which is minion damage. So minion damage is pretty accessible, and it comes in high amounts. And this notable basically makes it so that you can just pick that up on the bow and all sorts of other places, and it's going to be pretty chill, and allows you to roll with a bone helmet and get just a little bit of extra scaling. So that's why you take that, and that's why it's on the gear. Let's talk a little bit about auras, because auras are particularly powerful here. So in the ultimate endgame PUB, it does look a little bit different. You do have quite a lot of unreserved mana so that you can trigger Poacher's Mark, but we're not going to talk about that in this video because we're not super min-maxing here. I'm just trying to explain the concepts. So the mana, obviously because you're basically a blood magic type build, because you're using life tap on everything, even your movement skill has life tap on it, you don't actually have to worry about mana cost, so you can reserve the full bar, and that is exactly what we're doing. We're basically going to town with all of our auras here. We've got stuff like War Banner, we've got Malevolence, we've got Herald of Purity, we've got Pride, and I believe we also do have Blood and Sand and Vitality that we're rocking here, which does make for an overall reasonably good package and quite a lot of damage. Of course, we also did pick up aura nodes to support that and be able to do that, and that's only going to be getting stronger in 3.16 with the aura reservation changes. It's possible you may even be able to fit in skitterbots as well as all the auras we have advertised here. In addition to that, maybe you want to go for an enhance on anomalous blood and sand to get more projectile speed for more quality of life. All these are options in 3.16 that you can look into with your character, making it even more powerful. So very, very awesome there indeed. So of course, the other thing that really turbocharges this build is curses. So curses are very, very powerful. In the build that I'm having planning, we're going to be using a +2 chest, +1 curse chest, and the curses of choice are going to be vulnerability and Poacher's Mark. So Poacher's Mark gives you massive quality of life on bosses with life gain on hit, but also a massive amount of damage. And the way you acquire that is, of course, 2 rings, one with Poacher's Mark on hit and one with vulnerability on hit. But of course, that's not budget at all. There is budget options by using a Maloney's mechanism with a run of arrows and curse on hit, as well as a Poacher's Mark, and we're going to be going over that in future videos. But yeah, fair to say that this build is a very, very defensive one. You can obviously just pick up tons of life. Right now I'm only level 91, and all the rest of my points are pretty much going to be spec'd into life or damage, whichever one I pick. And you can also get even more powerful. So you can see here I am pathing over here to the Ranger. This is before the nerfs to evasion were announced, and I was taking acro, phase acro. In reality, you would chop all of this off and you would go for Duelist and Marauder and try and pick up some max res with Soul of Steel, some armor, and go that route and get the cluster jewel notable over here. It also allows you to pick up Bannerman and Champion of the Cause. So that's kind of the way you would be going in the future, and you can get way, way more life, as I've been mentioning, and it's going to be super duper awesome. So to kind of give you guys a little bit of an idea of kind of like what I'm planning here for League Start, this is not going to be a build for everyone to League Start. It is quite an advanced one to get going early on. It's most likely going to be wanting to be one of your second builds because, League starting early on is a little bit rough. Even though I am going to League Start it. I am going to go out on a limb and do that, and I'm going to explain to you how I'm going to do so and kind of what the gear progression and the path looks like, just kind of high level here. So obviously this is the ultimate version that you want to get to, but you can't start with it, not even close to. So in Act 1 to about 4 to 5, you're going to want to be playing Shattering Steel as a duelist and kind of just pathing through melee nodes and really getting strong that way. And then in that time, you also need to be picking up Spell Slinger gear, as well as leveling up an Exsanguinate, a Reap, and a Corrupting Fever in your offhand for a switch that you're going to do once you get the required gem sockets and enough levels on those gems. And in around Act 5, you're going to be swapping to a Bleed Spell Slinger setup, which you're going to be using a 4-link Reap Slinging setup, as well as a 4-link Exsanguinate setup and a 4-link Corrupting Fever with a 4-link Kinetic Blast, which is going to be the delivery method here. And that should carry you all the way through to maps. And into maps, you're going to be picking up, obviously Spell Slinger gear, which is going to get you far more powerful. And then throughout maps, you're going to be picking up stuff like the Cluster Jewels, which are incredibly potent for physical damage. They have a ton of stats on them. You're going to be picking those up and crafting them up, which aren't too hard. You can do it with Jagged Fossils. And you're going to be also picking up your normal jewels with dot multi on them and stuff like that, which is going to be really, really effective. And overall, you're going to be kind of moving through. And at a certain threshold, you're actually able to drop the Spell Slinging setup and swap to the Aura setup that I have here on this bow character. And that's going to allow you to basically just blitz through content and be really, really effective. Now, this is a build that might need to hang around in yellows or low reds for a little while before it really, really powers up with a few key gear pieces. And overall, once you're on Kinetic Blast and you've dropped the Spell Slinging setup, that is going to be where you stay until you craft some key pieces, allowing you to swap to bows. And that's going to basically be the full transition, and then after you get those key pieces, you swap to the Tornado Shot variant of Corrupting Fever, and that's where you are here. So overall, there's going to be far more detail here. I'm going to be hopefully making a bit of a guide for this build, either at League Start or a little bit after League Start, but hopefully you guys have enjoyed this little bit of a breakdown. If you have any questions about Corrupting Fever in general, I'm happy to answer them, but it does get a lot of its scaling from Gladiator. You could go for another ascendancy like Scion. I have seen some people do that, but Gladiator just is too powerful with its Arena Challenger node here, in my opinion. It's basically like Tailwind, as I've talked about in the other video, but it's very, very effective. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this initial introduction to the build. Hopefully you guys are excited about 3.16. It's definitely going to be, in my opinion, quite a good pick for everything but the new 5 ways. It's not very good at 5 ways at all. It's able to do 100% deli and all sorts of stuff like that. So hope you guys have enjoyed. I'll see you guys in the next one. Like if you want to see more content on this build and in general, and subscribe if you're not already. Until then, cheers.